Charley Pride was never just another country singer. From the moment folks first heard his smooth, comforting voice drifting across the airwaves in the mid-1960s, it was clear he had something truly special. At a time when few African-American performers had ever found a foothold in country music, he stepped up with faith, talent, and a big, welcoming smile. His warm, heartfelt approach captured America's attention, enough to topple the charts and even soothe people's worries in tense cultural times. Remembering him now, it's impossible not to feel a pang of awe. In his lifetime, he went from playing baseball in the segregated South to hitting number one with songs like Kissin' Angel Good Mornin'. And even toward the very end, despite the obstacles of aging and the sweeping changes in the industry, he held on to the values that made him so beloved: humility, kindness, and an unwavering love for music. That legacy matters as much now as it ever did, giving us a reason to celebrate not just Charley Pride's voice, but the humanity he embodied. Born in 1934 in Sledge, Mississippi, Charley grew up amid fields of cotton and a constant undercurrent of segregation. Life in the rural South was often a tough road, especially if you were a sharecropper's son with big dreams. Yet even as a child, he discovered a refuge in music. Radio stations would spin the latest country tunes. Hank Williams, Ernest Tubb, Red Foley, and young Charley soaked them in. Sometimes he'd imitate the singers he heard, humming those melodies after long days in the fields. But it wasn't just music capturing his heart, baseball also captured his imagination. In those early years, Charley dreamed of being a professional ball player just as vividly as he dreamed of standing on the Grand Ole Opry stage. He excelled in the Negro American League, playing for the Memphis Red Sox and other teams, doggedly pursuing a future that felt tantalizingly close. Those experiences taught him about discipline and hope, two qualities that would fuel his later success in country music. Country music in the 1960s was experiencing a fascinating evolution. New sounds were beginning to shape the industry, from the polished Nashville string sections to the rawer edge of the Bakersfield scene. It was one thing to love these songs in private, but quite another to step onto a stage in a genre that was almost entirely white. Yet from the start, he refused to hide who he was or apologize for it. "I never wanted to be just a novelty," he once told a small radio station interviewer early in his career. "I wanted people to hear my voice and feel what I was singing, not just see the color of my skin." That quiet courage laid the foundation for everything that followed. Charley's big break began taking shape when an RCA Records executive recognized the pure gold in that voice. By the mid-60s, Pride had started releasing singles that showed off his ability to pour heartfelt emotion into simple, relatable lyrics. As word spread, fans realized they were listening to something fresh, and a lot of folks who might never have listened to a black country singer found themselves falling head over heels for songs like Just Between You and Me. Soon enough, Charley Pride was performing on the Grand Ole Opry and collecting accolades like they were going out of style. In 1967, he garnered the first of what would eventually be multiple Grammy nominations. For a genre that prided itself on tradition, his rapid rise felt both surprising and, at least to those with more progressive views, inevitable. If someone sang that honestly, the logic went, how could an audience not embrace him? But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Back in those days, some radio DJs refused to play Pride's records once they learned he was black. Venues occasionally cited flimsy excuses to cancel shows. Charley never minced words about the racism he encountered, but he also focused on staying positive, refusing to let hate define his story. He kept leaning into his strengths, a gracious demeanor, an impressive vocal range, and an uncanny ability to sing about everyday experiences, love, heartache, hope, in a way that resonated with listeners from all walks of life. When Kissin' Angel Good Mornin arrived in 1971, it soared to number 1 on the country charts and even found crossover success on pop radio. Hearing a black artist, especially in that era, achieving such prominence was momentous. It validated Charley's insistence that music could indeed bring people together, no matter how society tried to keep them apart. As his career soared, Pride's schedule became relentless. Tours across the country, television appearances, award shows, and more. Yet friends often described Charley as the same old guy through it all. He bought a ranch and immersed himself in ranching life, finding peace in quiet moments away from the noise of fame. He'd joke that mending fences and tending livestock reminded him of his childhood on the farm. Except now, he had a bit more money in his pocket. His humility stood out. For instance, a lesser-known anecdote from the late 1970s. He donated a sizable sum to restore an old community center in Sledge, Mississippi, ensuring local kids had a safe place to gather. No press releases, no big show about it. Just a simple wish to give back to the place that shaped him. Even today, locals recall that gesture with profound gratitude, viewing it as evidence that Charley Pride never forgot where he came from. Another lesser-known story involves a small collaboration he did in the mid-'80s with a gospel quartet that never charted in a major way. Tucked away in the back of one of his albums was a song that blended Charley's soulful country style with traditional gospel harmonies. Some fans say it was one of his most heartfelt performances, pure, stripped down, and deeply personal. Although the track didn't garner widespread attention, it held special significance for him. He performed it live on a local TV telethon to raise money for a children's hospital, and observers noted how emotional he became by the end, voice trembling with sincerity. For a man who rarely wore his heart on his sleeve in public, that performance offered a rare window into how deeply he felt his calling, both as a musician and as someone who believed in uplifting others. Beyond his chart-topping hits, Charley Pride garnered a remarkable list of accolades. He joined the Grand Ole Opry in 1993, one of the few black members, then or now, and was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2000. He earned multiple Grammy Awards, CMA Awards, and the adoration of fans who saw him as living proof that country music belonged to everyone. Even so, what always defined him was a modest authenticity. He often said, "I'm just trying to sing a good song," and that direct, uncomplicated approach endeared him to people who might otherwise have stayed on the sidelines. In Charley's later years, he largely retreated from the bright glare of celebrity, preferring to invest time in his ranching business and other quieter pursuits. But he never fully stepped away from the stage. He'd pop up for special appearances, sometimes surprising fans at small venues. One friend who organized local concerts in Texas recalls a night in the early 2000s when Charley showed up unannounced, politely asking if he might join the lineup. When the promoter nervously said yes, of course, Charley slipped onto stage without fanfare. The room exploded with applause and tears as he delivered a short set of classics, including "Is Anybody Going to San Antone?", all with the same verve he'd had decades earlier. That night, older fans felt a swell of nostalgia, while younger country enthusiasts witnessed the living history standing right before them. As he aged, Charley made more public statements on racism, especially after high-profile tensions in the United States made headlines. By then, he was a seasoned elder statesman, and people listened closely to his words. He spoke calmly, never with bitterness, yet firmly about how society needed to remember that behind every stereotype was a person with hopes and dreams. He shared recollections of times he'd been denied hotel rooms, or the many times someone refused to shake his hand backstage. Despite all that, he insisted he'd found more kindness than cruelty overall. "I focus on the folks who welcome me," he said in one interview, "because that's the best part of human nature." Hearing him say that gave many people pause. With all the hardships he faced, he could have harbored anger. Instead, he chose grace. Throughout the 2010s, Charley stayed connected to fans. Social media wasn't exactly his comfort zone. He joked more than once that he missed the days when you could just pick up a phone and call someone, but he adapted. There were occasional Facebook posts or YouTube clips featuring short, heartfelt messages about music, love, and gratitude. Younger musicians lined up to collaborate with him, hoping to capture a piece of that magic. And indeed, Charley occasionally obliged, recording duets or making cameo appearances in music videos. He served as a mentor figure for those coming up in the industry, reminding them that even in a world obsessed with streaming stats and digital presence, it was still about reaching people's hearts. One up-and-coming artist recalled meeting him backstage at a small charity concert, describing it as a profound lesson in humility. "He asked me questions about my family," the artist remembered. "He just genuinely wanted to know who I was." Coming from a legend like that, it was beyond inspiring. In the final stretch of his life, Charley confronted the health challenges that often arise in one's later years. Arthritis sometimes made it tough to grip a guitar pick, yet he still managed. He took pride in maintaining a daily routine, rising early to walk around his property, watching the sunrise over the pasture. That ranch was his solace, a testament to what he'd built and the simpler joys he cherished. Neighbors recall seeing him wave from a distance, always ready with a friendly smile. His wife, Rosine, stood by him as she had for decades, offering steadfast support. The two would sit on their porch in the evenings, sipping iced tea, reminiscing about the places they'd gone and the songs they'd sung. According to family friends, Charley was especially nostalgic during those last years, speaking often about his boyhood in Mississippi, the thrill of playing ball, and the miraculous way fate steered him toward country music. But lurking in the background was a threat nobody could have anticipated: COVID-19. In 2020, the pandemic swept through the world, upending everyday life and leaving so many beloved figures vulnerable. Charley tried to be cautious, limiting public interactions and urging fans to stay safe. Yet in late 2020, news broke that he'd contracted the virus. For weeks, fans prayed for his recovery. This man who had once overcome so many odds, racial barriers, industry skeptics, personal challenges, was now fighting a microscopic adversary that gave no quarter. Sadly, on December 12, 2020, Charley Pride passed away from complications related to COVID-19. The country music world reeled in grief as countless tributes poured in. Artists across genres remembered him as a trailblazer and a gentle soul who wore his fame lightly. Another barrier had fallen with his death, the final proof that this virus spared nobody, not even legends. In the wake of Charley's passing, a small but intense debate arose. Some observers pointed to an awards ceremony in November 2020 where Charley had performed live and received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Country Music Association. They questioned whether that event might have exposed him to the virus. People disagreed vehemently about the timeline and the potential risks, with some blaming event organizers or the industry at large for not taking stricter precautions. Others argued that Charley had been a willing participant, fully aware of the potential dangers, but determined to share music one more time on a national stage. He was proud to be there, and he wanted to celebrate, insisted one close friend. Opinions varied, and no one could say for certain how or when he contracted the virus. In the end, many concluded that, Like so many others who died from COVID-19, Charley's passing underscored the unpredictability and heartbreak of a once-in-a-century pandemic. Some critics also revisited the larger question of whether Charley's presence in country music was sufficiently acknowledged by the industry he helped shape. Why, they asked, was he one of the genre's only prominent black stars for so long? And after so many decades, why did the next wave of black country artists, like Darius Rucker or Mickey Guyton, arrive only recently and with their own stories of resistance and difficulty? Fans of Charley argued that the industry should do more to honor his pioneering role, perhaps by dedicating more resources to supporting diversity in the genre. Others contended that the steps to rectify past exclusion were in motion, but these things take time. Although the debates can get heated, they also underline the profound impact Charley Pride had on country music's cultural landscape. His success opened doors, yet systemic change is often slow and requires ongoing dedication. That tension forms a significant part of his legacy. All these threads, his final performance at the CMA Awards, the raging pandemic, the decades of quiet dignity in the face of prejudice, add a layer of tragedy to Charley's passing, but also reinforce his human depth. Charley Pride was never just a chart-topping artist. He was a man who stared down entrenched racial barriers, a father who raised his children to value kindness, a husband who found solace in a stable marriage that lasted over half a century, and a friend who took time to chat with strangers. In a world that often feels segmented and fractious, he symbolized unity and understanding. People who met him in person would talk about how disarming his warmth was. He had a knack for putting folks at ease, whether they were top-tier record executives or fans who saved money for months just to see him in concert. From an industry standpoint, Charley Pride's career stands as a pivotal milestone in country music's golden age. The 1960s and 70s were already times of dynamism and reinvention for the genre. His arrival at that exact moment when Nashville was ready for new voices but still struggling with old biases was monumental. He helped prove that country could be universal, its themes transcending color lines. On a broader cultural scale, his life invites reflection on the American dream, the complexities of race relations, and the healing nature of music. For older viewers who followed him through the decades, recalling the first time they heard Kiss and Angel Good Mornin' might conjure images of family gatherings or a simpler era. For younger generations, discovering his catalog can be an eye-opening journey through a rich tapestry of old-school country that still speaks to heartbreak and hope, love and loss, timeless human experiences. It's also worth noting that Charley's later life reveals a nuanced balance between quiet retirement and public presence. While he stepped away from relentless touring, he remained open to occasional performances and collaborations, as if he couldn't resist the tug of the spotlight, at least in small doses. That gentle reemergence, often in surprise guest spots, felt like a blessing to fans who yearned to see him one more time. He treated his ranch business with the same humility he'd shown on stage, maintaining a relatively small staff and making sure his operations supported the local community. People who worked with him say they never once heard him brag about his fame or success. Instead, he'd just roll up his sleeves, get to work, and then maybe share an anecdote about some old baseball memory if asked. That's the Charley Pride they knew, a man grounded by his roots, forever shaped by the challenges and triumphs that led him from poverty to stardom. In those final months, family members mention that Charley grew more introspective. He'd recall specific lyrics he'd written decades earlier and marvel at how life had changed since then. According to his son Dion, Charley sometimes expressed wonder at how fast it had all gone by, from his baseball stints to the thrill of hearing his first hit on the radio. He felt overwhelming gratitude, especially for the fans who stuck with him through thick and thin. "They're the ones who made my life what it is," he said. And in that sense, Charley Pride's story is a reciprocal love affair between an artist and his audience, each supporting and uplifting the other over the course of many decades. For anyone looking for controversies or major scandals, in Charley's life they'll find little. He managed to steer clear of the kind of tabloid drama that ensnared so many stars, especially in later years, when the 24-hour news cycle often magnified every misstep. The controversies that did arise were mainly external. People questioning his place in a historically white industry, or, more recently, debating the circumstances of his final public appearances during the pandemic. Through it all, Charley's responses were measured and consistent. He believed in personal responsibility, mutual respect, and letting talent speak for itself. While that might sound almost too wholesome in this day and age, many insist it was genuinely who he was. That sincerity might well be his greatest asset, and one of the reasons his legacy persists so strongly. His passing during the pandemic casts a poignant shadow over his legacy, underscoring that even legends aren't immune to life's fragility. But rather than let sadness be the final note, many have chosen to celebrate the fullness of his story, his childhood, his baseball dreams, his chart-topping records, his philanthropic gestures, his ranch, and the unwavering humility that endeared him to just about everyone he met. The Country Music Hall of Fame set up a special online exhibit to mark his contributions, highlighting interviews with people who knew him well. One story from that exhibit recalls how he'd sometimes walk around the Hall of Fame anonymously, pausing to admire items from other artists' careers. A staff member recognized him once, offered to give him a guided tour, but he declined, saying, "I'm just another fan today." In that unassuming comment, we see why Charley Pride continues to matter. He viewed himself as part of a larger tapestry of American music rather than the center of it. His humility wasn't an act, it was ingrained. And that kind of attitude can remind us all that fame doesn't have to diminish our basic human decency or our appreciation for others. While the complexities of race relations, commercial pressures, and the shifting tastes of audiences all played a role in shaping Charley's career, the story we ultimately remember is simpler. A kind-hearted man who sang from his soul and bridged divides one melody at a time. And so we come to the close of Charley Pride's narrative, but the echoes remain. If you find yourself missing that rich baritone or wanting to revisit those classic records, let yourself drift back to a time when Charley was on the radio daily, filling rooms with a hopeful melodic glow. Hear that familiar twang, those warm notes, and remember the man behind them, a country boy from Mississippi who loved baseball, believed in unity, and spent his life turning barriers into bridges. Let that memory linger in your heart, reminding you that kindness and resilience can carry you a long, long way. In a world hungry for connection, Charley Pride's final lesson might be the simplest of all, that the best music transcends categories and classifications, reminding us that we're all capable of understanding each other if we just stop to listen. And that wraps up today's video. If this video resonated with you, please give it a like, leave a comment with your feedback, and subscribe to stay updated on upcoming videos. Appreciate you watching.